Hello everyone, my name is Mike Mortensen, Professor of Graphic Communications. You can reach me at mmortens@carolu.edu. I'm going to give you a quick tutorial on iMovie. iMovie is an application that is located on all our Macintoshes here at the university. So if you find a Macintosh, you can go into the Macintosh hard drive and open up iMovie. In order to do that, you can go to the desktop, go to computer, and then under applications, if you scroll down under applications, you'll find an icon that's got a star next to it, and that's called iMovie. You can double click on that and launch that. Another one that we will probably need to access is iPhoto, but let's leave that alone for the moment. But once you go ahead and click on iMovie, you'll see the application launch, and it looks like this. You'll have what we call libraries here on the left. You'll have a bin here where all your content will reside, and then on the right will be the final video editing here in this viewport. Before I get into all of the elements within iMovie, I'd just like to quickly discuss the different file types and the types of cameras you'll most likely be using for your projects. So most of you will be using a DSLR or a handheld. Some might actually use the iPhone, iPad, or other mobile devices to do your filming. So the big question is, how do you get the content over, to iMovie, and then how do you get from iMovie out as a final movie? And there are some specific steps you need to take to make this happen. When you're working with a DSLR camera like this one, or you're working with maybe the handheld that looks like this, they all use what is called an SD card. This is what an SD card looks like, and they can be different sizes, but in order to shoot film, they got to be these cards have to be in the camera, and then they get stored on this SD card. The other way to do it would be use your mobile device like iPhone and shoot the videos with that. But to get that information from the SD card from your phone, that it needs to go somewhere into a folder that you can have access to at any time, and use that folder, to import your footage into iMovie. And the most important thing to do, though, is to have what is called an external hard drive. And you can get those, buy those somewhere about it. You can buy one for 1 terabyte size. One's could be a 2 terabyte, but you'll need a nice external drive to store all your information on. You can't use the desktop or your Q drive. The Q drive is just not big enough for the video files. The desktop, you could use it, but I think they wipe those computers clean every day, so if you started working on it the next day, it wouldn't be there for you. A thumb drive isn't going to work. It's just going to be too slow for you, and it may not have enough storage room for your video files. So these files can get pretty big, and your best option would be to use an external hard drive for this. If you have any questions about that, you can email me and ask me if a certain hard drive that you might have will work. Once you have that external hard drive, you can start setting up a folder structure in there. Maybe you have a folder called audio and one called video. And what you'll do next is to take the information from the SD card and put it onto that external. So once you pull that SD card out, you'll most likely use a device like this. It's called an SD card reader, and you can see it's got a USB connection. And once that's plugged into the Macintosh and you put your SD card in here, that application that I mentioned earlier called iPhoto will launch, and that's going to sync up with your SD card. And in iPhoto, you're going to be able to select the footage from that SD card and import it into iPhoto. And then finally from iPhoto, you can then take your footage and drag that off of iPhoto and put that into your external drive under a folder perhaps called video. Another way is some Macintosh hard drives actually have this slot built into the Macintosh, and so you could put the SD card into the Macintosh, and then you'll find an icon on the desktop of that SD card, and from there you can take the footage and pull that off the SD card and put that onto the external drive. The other option would be to use your iPhone or iPad, and once you plug your iPhone or iPad into the Macintosh hard drive, you'll see that it will also sync up to iPhoto, and you would use the same process of selecting the footage from your device and getting that into iPhoto, and then from there, from that application, you can drag those video files and then store them onto your external drive. I know this can be a challenging process, but it's extremely important when working with video files this big. So an external hard drive is going to be very important, and then utilizing the card reader or just the SD card to get the information over onto that external. Okay, so I'm going to in my video audio file I have a couple audio files called MP3. I have a few video files. You can import JPEGs into iMovie as well. So audio, video, and still images can easily be imported into iMovie. So let's go into iMovie now. So with this layout as such, you'll see on the left hand side we have libraries. The next panel over here, there says no clips found, but this will be a bin where we'll put our footage in. And then on the right hand side, you'll actually be able to double click on a certain footage that you shot and view it from here on the right hand side. The first thing we need to talk about though is creating a library for your project. So under the iMovie library, you want to click on iMovie library and go to File, New Event. So you're essentially creating an event specifically for your project. So if I go to New Event, it's going to most likely put in the current date, but here you can type in the name of your project. I'll just type in Mike Project. And so from here under Mike Proj is where I'll import all my footage that I've copied out onto the external drive and put it actually into this bin here. So if I go click on this arrow down, it says import media. I can go to my folder called video audio, and in here I can import video. I can also go to file, import media, and perhaps open up a MP3 file. So when I scroll down with the scroll bar, here's my video and here's my audio. So I've got two files in there. So depending on what I scroll over, you'll see that the viewport changes based off of where I am scrolling. So I can easily left click and drag and kind of look at the footage that I may or may not want in the final edit. Okay, so you got those three panels, and that's all located under the tab called Media. The next tab over is called Projects, and this is where you actually set up your first project. Not library, but the name of the actual project that you'll be editing. So you would go to the plus sign, and you would want to make a movie, not a trailer. So if I go to movie, it's going to have you pick from some themes, and we'll want to use the no theme. So you highlight that and select create, and it'll come in and you'll give it a name. I just left mine called My Movie. So now I've got two projects. I have one that I worked on earlier, and then I have one here that's empty. There's nothing in it at the moment. The next tab over is called Theater, and we won't use that tab. So we'll be using the Media tab. Media meaning all the footage that you bring into a library, and then your projects here. So once all your media is inserted, into the Mike Project library, we'll go to the Projects tab, and then what you do is you left double click on your project. Mine's called My Movie, and now the menu looks a little bit different. If I go to my library called Mike Proj, There's my bin with all my information, similar to the media panel. And if I scroll over it, you'll see that the video shows up full on the right hand side. And then what's new down below is what is called a timeline. This is where we drag our edited content down into the timeline and stitch all our content together to make our final movie. So it's really easy. What you do is you kind of scroll through your video and select what you want. For example, if I want some footage in here, I would left click and drag, and you'll get these yellow markers that come up, and it'll also show you the number of seconds that you're selecting from that video. And you can left click and drag that left and right. I can also go back to the beginning of that and left click and drag, and you're essentially selecting your in and out points within that footage. And once you have that, you can either click on the plus sign, that'll put it down in the timeline, or you can left click and drag your footage down into the timeline. So now the video that I selected up here is down here in the timeline, and once I grab this white playback head and click and move left to right, I'm doing what is called scrubbing. If I hit my space bar, it'll actually play the video along with the audio that came with it. So a lot of the videos that you'll be shooting will actually have audio with it, and the blue line underneath the video here, which shows what we call a waveform, is the audio. You'll see a little black line that goes all the way across as well, and that's the level of the audio. If you left click and drag that line down to 0%, you're essentially muting the audio from that footage. So a lot of times you won't want the audio, and you can just drag that down to mute it, and then what you have is just your video. So if I hit the space bar now, you'll see I've only got the video. Well, you'll keep scrolling down through your content and again picking and dragging the amount of video that you want from your media. And I'll grab another section here and I'll left click and drag that down next to the next clip. So we're starting to build or stitching together our videos along this timeline. If I drag left to right, I can actually start to see the timeline build. Next to the left of this thing called settings, I can drag this and it'll zoom in and out along your timeline, so you can start to see more of the timeline and the footage that's on it. So now I've got two clips that I've pulled from one original clip up here, and so what I'm doing is essentially editing the footage now. This one has no audio, I turned it down. This one has audio, I'm going to turn that one down as well. This one's 5.3 seconds long, this one's 10.9. If I double click on that footage right here, only that footage that I double click will show up here in the upper right. And from there I can use these icons up here to do some color correcting or cropping or stabilizing of the footage. So there's a lot of values, properties up here that you can work with once you double click on some video down here in the timeline. If I double click on this one, I can start editing this footage, that second piece. If for some reason this one's a little too long, I can still continue editing that footage down here in the timeline by clicking on the yellow bar and dragging it left or right by either adding or subtracting from that footage. So now I'm down to 9 seconds here for this first piece. So if I move my playback head at the beginning, I can hit the space bar and it's going to play through the video. So ultimately you'll have several clips along the timeline that you've edited to create a final video down here within the timeline. If for some reason you wanted to clip this footage, let's say you wanted to kind of split it down the middle and pull it apart, maybe you want some text in between there, you could right click at that location and say split clip, and it's going to split it. Perhaps I double click here and I want to take out a small section here. I could split the clip there and then grab that clip and delete it and get it out of there. So you can still do some editing down here in the timeline. So initially you want to select your footage up here, drag it down in the timeline, and then you can continue editing down here in the timeline by double clicking. If you right click on some footage, you'll see in the menu pull down that you'll have some other editing tools that you can do to that footage. So that's editing the original footage from up here. I can also grab audio and drag that down into my footage down here, and that actually puts the audio, we call it audio track. So audio is showing up down here in the lower section of the timeline. Your video is up here. So we're working with our media tab essentially, and that's this tab right here. If I go to audio or I go to titles, you'll see that our selection menu changes here based off the tab. So if I want to work with some transitions, let's say I want our footage to dissolve from this clip to this clip, I could grab what we call a cross dissolve and put that in between my footage, and that's going to create a dissolve between those two clips. So it's really an easy, intuitive way to edit footage. It's just a matter of dragging and dropping these preset effects onto your timeline. Titling will be a big one for you. So what you can do is, if you click on one of these, you'll see by hitting the space bar, you'll see the effect of that text titling. And if you hit your space bar again, it'll stop. But you can scroll through the different titles. Perhaps there's just a still title you want to use, and you can find that in here as well. I'm just going to grab a title. I'm just going to left click and drag it down, and it's going to force itself in at the beginning here. And because I've got this double clicked here, I can come in here and change the titling or the text here, along with the font type and size and any other values I want to change that are available to me up here in the upper right. But now what I've got is a kind of a beginning title. I could probably put a transition between the title and here, and then the video starts. Let's say I want to put some text over the top of my video. You can do that as well. So if I drag that, left click and drag that over without letting my mouse go, I can kind of place that text somewhere along that footage, wherever that purple bar next to the plus sign, that's where the title would be inserted. So it resides right above the video, but in fact it sits on top of the video, and now you can put some titling over the top of your video. So you can put titles by themselves as intros or outros, but you can also put text in, within the timeline right over the footage, and then at any time you can come in here and move your text around and change the text and change values of that text up here in the upper right. So as you can see, I'm adding audio, video fairly easily, and then adding text to start to create my final project timeline. So I've shown you transitions. There are some backgrounds you can put in. I don't use those very often. Certainly you'll probably put some titles in, and then you can go back to your media that you've imported and continue selecting video, putting in the timeline, and then perhaps editing it down here in this timeline. So once you have your video completed here with transitions and audio and text, you'll be ready to get this out as a certain file type. And the typical way to do it with a lot of applications is to do what we call share that file. So while keeping my cursor down here in the timeline, if I go to File, Share, you can see I can share it as an email. What it does, it's going to save this out or export and compress it to a file size where we can actually email it or put it on iTunes, up to YouTube, to Facebook, or to finally save it out as a file that's a file type. So we could save it as a .mov file, and from that point then we could actually put it up on YouTube. But I'm thinking that you'll probably use the file feature for the share, and you can look through these. Do you want the video and audio only, 720, and you want to render it at its best, and then just continue going through as it asks you questions. You'll go through the next and save it out to the folder as a final video file, and then it'll render it out, and then in that folder you'll have a movie file of your project. So that's how it all goes together. It's fairly easy to do. You just gotta kind of go in and explore a lot of the settings. If you're not sure, click on something and right click on it and see what you have in that menu. Make sure that you always have your library selected when you start importing files into it, and add audio titles and transitions along the timeline, and then finally share it. Again, just a review, when you use your cameras, somehow you have to get that content off those devices. It'll either be a SD card, or you'll sync your device up to the Macintosh hard drive, and then you're going to need to get those movie files that you shot onto some kind of device for you to store and take with you. You might be working on different machines, so you'll need to store all your files onto that drive, and the best option would be to have an external hard drive and store everything on there. The Q drive just isn't going to work for you. It's probably not going to be big enough. Again, a thumb drive may not be big enough. You might be able to store it on the cloud, and the desktop is an option as far as working and editing, but again, then you'll want to get that off the desktop onto an external or some kind of storage device. So again, if you have any questions on storage devices, be sure to email me. Otherwise, I think you should be set with iMovie. Thank you.